Welcome to the IonaHoops.com podcast with your host, Guy Flatico.
My goodness, we're already in late June, 3 months into the Tobin regime, and just over 3 months away from Meet the Gaels in October. Can't wait until then, but for now, you're stuck with Season 3, Episode 34 of the IonaHoops.com podcast. The staff's been busy, so you'll be hearing Marlon Brando for the first time in a while. And for the first time ever, you're going to hear a rising star in the National College Hoops landscape. Kevin Sweeney joins the podcast. We'll excuse the fact that he's a Siena guy at heart. Or will we? You'll have to check out that interview to find out later in the pod. And you also have to check out these Iona Iotas in your ears right now.
Iona Iotas.
Welcome to Gael Nation. Justin Menard. The class of 2024 combo guard out of St. Thomas More chose Iona over offers from Towson, Albany, FDU, NJIT, Sacred Heart, and NC A&T, and interest from Pitt, LaSalle, Air Force, and Vermont. The 6'3 Menard is a three-star guard on both ESPN and Rivals. He's a pass-first guard with a nice outside shot as well. Again, welcome to Iona, Justin.
Iona Iotas.
Everyone wants to know, what's up with Iona's NIL? Well, let me be clear. Technically, it exists and has been in play and has played a role in building this year's roster. These are facts. So those who are fearing we're behind in the NIL arms race, let me ease your concerns that that's not happening. So why isn't it public yet for all of the masses to contribute to? Well, one word, Patino. Now, of course, Slick Rick was working on Iona's NIL going back quite a ways, but as you would guess, and to put it simply, the design of the NIL at that time made it easy for him to, well, take it with him to Jamaica. So basically, the Iona collective needed to be set up from scratch upon his departure, much like our roster. So another parting gift from Ricky. Can you imagine what these past couple months have been like for the staff? Rebuilding the roster from scratch with an NIL that is being pieced together on the fly. Wow. Anyway, we're not far off from seeing Iona's NIL collective officially launch. Word is it's going to be happening next month. Still working out some of the details, sorting through some final red tape. So hang in there, folks. It's coming.
Iona Iotas.
We're still waiting for the full release of the non-conference slate, but another morsel is out there. Iona and Charleston are beginning a home-and-home series this year in Charleston with a return game in New Rochelle in 2024-25. The Cougars were everyone's darling this past season, going 31-4, coming out of the CAA, falling short in the first round against eventual national finalists San Diego State. Charleston is expected to be very strong again next season, so a tough road test to come for Tobin and the Gaels. And now, let's see what's going on in recruiting circles, starting with your portal. It's been a couple episodes since we've heard that wonderful ditty. Well, we did put a feeler out to Mississippi Valley State for transfer. Raekwon Brown just completed his junior season. Brown's a 6'6 guard. He averaged 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and over a steal a game in 22 games played this season. Once again, pretty clear the priority for the staff during this overall was getting big guards and wings in the portal, and Brown fits that mold. Not sure if we're going to be making a move here, but hey, at least it gave me an excuse to play that portal music. I know you guys have been missing Brando as well, and, well, the Iona staff has been very, very busy lately, so we'll bring back the offer roundup.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
As I said, the staff's been plenty at it lately, so we've got a healthy list of reported offers to get through, so let's get to it. We're going to start off with a whole bunch from the class of 2024, starting with 6'7 forward Chike Ndefo of Vermont Academy. Yes, he is the brother of Casey Ndefo of Elite 8 St. Peter's fame. This Ndefo does have a similar feel to his game as well. And so Siena and Fairfield have also both offered, as well as Grasso and Bryant, as well as UMBC. We've also reportedly offered Ricky McKenzie, a 6'4 shooting guard out of Marietta, Georgia. He's a pure scorer who can shoot it from deep, score through contact, great handle, has a bunch of other recent offers, including New Mexico State, Georgia Southern, Kennesaw State, and Hampton. How about a visit? 6'3" guard Josh Reed took an unofficial visit to Iona last week. Reed, out of Archbishop Wood in Philly, was offered by Iona during his visit and had recent offers from Buffalo and Quincy, and also took an unofficial visit to Drexel recently. He's not one of those guys that's proven he can score in a variety of ways. More class of 2024 offers. Chris Johnson is a 6'5" guard out of Maryland with offers from URI, Towson, Mount St. Mary's, and Norfolk State. There's also Ty Bevins, a 6'5" combo guard out of Maryland as well. Seeing a theme with big guards, by the way. Anyway, this one is rated 3 stars on Rivals and 247 and on 3 recruiting services. Offers from Georgetown, Temple, Charleston, GMU, GW, Hofstra, Drexel, Towson, and others. Can be a real impact player if we can land him. Let's go a little bigger now that we've covered the gamut of wings for that are out there in the class of 2024. How about a 6'9" power forward out of White Plains by way of South Kent Prep, Jacob Hogarth. He's 4 stars in ESPN. He's got offers from Creighton, Maryland, St. John's, Bonaventure, Buffalo, Fairfield, Quincy, Bryant, and Maine. Another guy sounds like he can have a real impact for us. Last one for 2024, Brant Byers, a 6'8" small forward. He was offered by Maryland all the way back in 2020, but his most recent offers a bit more tepid. American, Mount St. Mary's, Lehigh, Stonehill. Okay, how about this? We are going to wrap up this segment with 3 class of 2026 offers, all of them from none other than Stepanak High School. 6'3" guard Hassan Kouresi, 6'4" guard Josiah Jervis, and 6'6" forward Dylan Perry. Kouresi has offers from St. Bonaventure in Manhattan, Jervis from St. John's, St. Bonaventure, Manhattan, and Fordham, and Perry from Hofstra in Manhattan. Whew, this staff has been busy as of late. So let's face it, as Iona fans, it's our nature to dislike everything touched by Siena in some way. But allow me to put forth an exception. He's Kevin Sweeney, college hoops writer for Sports Illustrated and a regular contributor to the national media network, The Field of 68. Let's welcome him onto the podcast now. Let's keep the razzing to a minimum. We know he's a Siena guy, but he is a growing personality in college hoops, and let's welcome to the podcast now. Kevin Sweeney is a college basketball writer for Sports Illustrated and a regular contributor to the Field of 68 media network. He's one of the top young hoops media stars out there right now, but no one's perfect, and Kevin grew up in upstate New York and is, well, a Siena guy at heart. Will you let that slide for a few minutes here as we welcome Kevin to the podcast for the first time? Kevin, what's up?
Yeah, I appreciate it, guy. I wasn't sure if I would ever get this invite or if the pitchforks would be out for me, but I appreciate you having me on.
So I think quite a few of the regular listeners to this pod know who you are. But if you want to take a couple minutes to kind of introduce yourselves to the rest of the Gael Nation and give us your life story, go for it.
Yeah, so like you said, I work at SI now. Been there for now almost 2 full years, which is crazy. Yeah. But have been in kind of the college basketball world since February of 2016. And that was when I started kind of tweeting and blogging, for those that remember, cbcentral.com. Wrote a lot more, I think, more mid-major stuff. I'd like to continue doing that. Obviously, like, we have to write what will get read. And I think, and I'm proud that we have done a lot of good mid-major stuff and kind of fortuitously gotten to do things like I was the guy who was there for all 4 St. Peter's NCAA tournament games and things like that, which was all very poetic. But you know, the reason I fell in love with college basketball, the reason I wanted to blog about it, and I was kind of influenced by a lot of people that covered the MAAC, like, you know, Jaden Daly and John Templin and guys like that, was the fact that, you know, I grew up, like, my first real introduction to college basketball was the Siena teams under Fran McCaffrey that were obviously really, really good. And like, my dad went to Siena, my brother wound up graduating from there. My mom works there now. I'm not sure if that's proprietary. I don't think it's proprietary. Who cares? Yeah. But you know, it's like the whole, it's a kind of a family business. And I don't think I realized at the time when like Sienna's beating Ohio State in the NCAA tournament how ridiculous it is for like the tiny 3,000 student liberal arts college in upstate New York to be beating Ohio State or blowing out Vanderbilt or like building the types of teams that they had. And so, that led to a lot of heartbreak in coming years after that when they weren't as good, and when they were repeatedly tormented by these Iona Gaels. But I think it first was, oh, I love Siena. Then it was, I love the MAAC. Then it was, I love mid-major basketball. And then it was, I love college basketball, and have just been really fortunate to make some great connections around the college basketball world, whether it be media people, coaches who've kind of welcomed me with open arms. And I get to do what I love every single day, which is, I think, pretty rare. And I'm certainly very grateful for the opportunity.
Well, yeah, that's and here's a question I have for you too. I mean, for years, obviously, you're going to give the priority to the big schools. There's more clicks, there's more viewers, and all of that. There does seem to be an increase in mid-major media coverage over the last few years. And again, people like yourself who kind of were ingrained in it and now becoming more national. I'm thinking of people like Sean Paul too. Is there more? I mean, is there more of a increase in that, or am I just imagining that?
I don't think so. I think I think the Philly State's been really valuable in the sense that like it's just given, obviously, look, I work with them a lot. We certainly talk about Kentucky and Duke plenty, but I think the fact that there is a national kind of platform for college basketball diehards, I think has really, really helped. And I think it's given people like me and people like Sean and people really, I think young people in general who have been given opportunities. I think of the Robinson twins who played at Quinnipiac, who are now in the media lane. Like, it's just, I think we've been really lucky to have that platform from Jeff and Rob. I think the other thing too is like, it's been a good time to be around mid-major basketball, right? Like, obviously there's been so much change and it's, oh my gosh, it's NIL this and, money that. But at the end of the day, like I was sitting around watching Princeton make the Sweet 16. And I was like, this doesn't feel that crazy anymore because of the amount of like nuts stuff that has happened in the last 2 years between Oral Roberts and St. Peter's and Fairleigh Dickinson. Like, it's become somewhat routine that these things happen. And these stories are stuff that people still care about, right? Like the way that FDU was covered, obviously Tobin was a great story and that team was cool and unique and fun, but like people love an underdog, and that's not changing. So whether the landscape's going to continue to shift, it's not going to get easier, I think, for teams at this level to build really great teams. But when they have that success, which they will continue to have, people are going to want to read about it. And I've been fortunate to get to write a few of those stories.
Also, as your stature is kind of rising in college hoop circles, I'm sure you've obviously go out of your way more so than ever to be objective, even with a school like Iona that you've grown up disliking. But wait a minute, hold the phone. There's actually now a legit reason for you to, dare I say, have respect for the Iona program these days. Tell us about your connection to the new staff here in New Rochelle.
Yeah, I mean, I've started to kind of collect gear from all like the staffs that I'm pretty close with. And obviously I'm not like running around like wearing it to games, but like, yeah, I'm sitting on the couch, like, yeah, I'll throw on like a Loyola Chicago t-shirt. Like, that's cool. And I mean, I guess I might have to do that with Iona at some point, which I think will be kind of weird. I'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing here. But no, so I've known Tobin for probably 3 years now. We connected first during the pandemic, and I did a Zoom call with him when he was at Stack. And honestly, I think, I was just trying to find unique stuff to talk about. And he was an interesting guy, a guy I had kind of been somewhat familiar with just because I knew that people talked a lot about him from his time at Siena, his time in the MAAC. And was a guy who just flat out won. And I was always kind of fascinated by like the Division II to Division I jump. So I wanted to talk to him, and we connected for probably 20 minutes on Zoom, and just like one of the most authentic and real people I'd ever dealt with. And kind of continued our relationship through the next few years. Obviously it grew once he was a Division I coach, because I felt like there was some back and forth that we could do, right? Like, unfortunately, like I think one of the ways that media and coaches build relationships is kind of information sharing, and there's more information to share when you're a Division I coach than a Division II coach. But had a tremendous amount of respect for Tobin, and I remember he got the job at FDU, and we were doing for Field of 68 this Off the Carousel series, and he got the job, and I texted Goodman the next day. I was like, "Can I do Tobin Anderson? I have a relationship with him." And Goodman was like, "How the hell do you know Tobin Anderson?" It's like, he was so kind of out of left field and unknown, and so to do that Zoom with him a few days after getting the FDU job, and then do it again with him after getting the Iona job a year later, and him be known by literally everyone, not just in college basketball media, but kind of in the sports world at large, was a pretty wild twist. So he's become a really good friend, a loyal friend to me, but also their staff. Pat Wallace, who's I guess the top assistant. I don't know if the levels are defined, but came from Loyola Chicago. I've known him for probably 4 years. I met him first when he was a grad assistant at Northwestern. I was an undergrad there. He went to Loyola Chicago to be the video coordinator and then an assistant coach for the last 2 years. And I live a mile from Loyola's campus. I'm around a lot. They've been really good, which has obviously been helpful to me just being in that backyard. And Pat is not a colleague. Pat is a friend. Like Pat and I talk all the time, and it has very little to do with, like, what can each of us get out of this, right? We just love basketball, and he's one of the hardest working people I know. Super excited for him to be at Iona. And I think he's just like an absolute superstar in this business. And also got to know Kyle Washington as well, who's Pat's good friend from Brewster Academy days, and now he's, I think, the player development guy at Iona. He was video at Loyola, and so I met him the past year when say hello. So very likable staff, painfully likable, again, as the guy that has usually found reasons to dislike the Iona Gaels for the last decade or so, but very happy for those guys, and I think you guys are in great hands.
So and yeah, we're excited about it. There's a good, it's more than a half and half. It's for sure that when the old regime left and Tobin came in, that it's almost like, hey, we certainly liked the winning that Pitino led us to, but the stress I think that he caused the fans with, will he leave or not, or who's he taking with him, and even I know the athletic office itself, I think, is better frame of mind these days. And again, just the difference in what the situation was. I mean, in being in press conferences with Pitino for 3 years, I still don't think he knows my name. Meanwhile, like a week and a half after Tobin had the job, he was on my podcast, and I have his cell phone number. So it's just a different world for us, and we're willing to trade a few spots in Ken Palm ratings or to get some of that stuff back that we used to have at Iona. So yeah, everybody that's met them and feels the same exact way you do. I've been at a few different events with them now, and they're all just really down to earth people who are excited to just be involved with basketball and be surrounded by people who are like junkies who want to talk hoops. So
there's just like an authenticity to them, right?
Yeah.
And look, like there are many words to describe Rick Pitino. I don't think that people would often use authentic as one of them.
Right.
And I think obviously that'll be a fresh breath of fresh air for you guys.
Absolutely. So what Tobin and Pat and the rest of the staff have done in rebuilding Iona's roster in 2 months is nothing short of remarkable. Certainly there's no way to know how it's all going to fit together just yet, but your thoughts on what you've seen of that roster and what you know of some of those players.
Yeah, it was funny. I was talking to Tobin for the Off the Carousel interview on Field 68 probably a month ago at this point, maybe a month and a half. And he was like, yeah, I filled like 20 scholarships in a calendar year, which is like the most ridiculous thing to ever possibly try to do, but very 2023. And I think all things considered, right, like especially in like an uncertain NIL climate and transitioning, and I mean, didn't get the job late, but also didn't get it early, right? It took a couple of kind of moves on the domino board to get Iona open and then to get Tobin the job. So I think he did a tremendous job, really filling this thing out. I know they have one spot, maybe they'll toy with it, maybe they won't, but I think they did a good job of combining some of the athleticism that I think they'll want defensively with the skill level and shooting, which I think is really important for that offensive system. Obviously, I think probably a little bit more thin up front, but that's somewhere Tobin's probably comfortable. And I think it's difficult in his system. Obviously, he wants to have size. Like he was joking with me, like everyone thinks I want to play really small just because I had that at FDU, but I had that at FDU because I got the job in May, and there's not a lot of good bigs out there in May, right? Just that's the reality. And I think probably a similar situation at Iona, but I think it's difficult to find bigs that fit like their, some of the 5-out motion stuff they're going to do offensively. So to keep King Oz, as I hear he's referred to these days, I think is obviously a big deal for them. Getting older at point guard with Joel Brown is big. I know they're very excited about him.
Yeah.
I've kind of been on hot and cold on him just from the Cal tape, but Cal was such a disaster show that I would like to try to give anyone the benefit of the doubt who played in that system, and with the lack of talent around him, I think he should probably be solid at the next level. And then I think Edon is obviously a huge addition, just in terms of like, first off, he was one of the first guys to commit, and that really helped. But I think also is a guy that has all MAAC level talent in terms of like a bigger guard who can make shots. And I think he's probably like, if you ask me today who's the leading scorer on Iona next year, I guess I would say him. That's a kind of hard thing to say. I think there's not a lot of necessarily separation between some of these guys, but I think he's probably the safest choice to say, yeah, this guy's going to lead Iona in scoring next year.
Yeah. So you're a MAAC guy. You just watched all but one all MAAC player from 3 all MAAC teams either graduate or hit the portal. I mean, I'm watching this and I'm like, what is happening in my league here? This is what kind of year are we in for? I mean, some teams seem to have rebuilt well enough, Iona among them, but what kind of year is this league in for?
I think it's gonna be tough, obviously, and I think there's reason after reason why this portal exodus happened. Whether it's obviously NIL is a part of it. Obviously, it's the coaching changes and stuff like that. Sometimes it's just bad luck, timing, whatnot. But yeah, I think no matter how good recruiting everyone does, right? Like you can sit there and say, wow, Tobin did an amazing job. There's no Walter Claytons on this Iona team, right? Like he's an elite college basketball player. He's not an elite mid-major player, right? Like there's, I think, Carm did a nice job at Siena adding pieces, but it's really hard to replace a Javian McCollum. That guy's really good. He's going to probably start a point guard at Oklahoma. Niagara loses Thomason. He's an awesome player, right? Like it's just, no matter how good work you do in the portal, you're always kind of swimming upstream when you're losing superstars. And you kind of have to hope that you can keep enough around that you have this kind of continuity, and then nail a portal guy or two, nail a high school guy or two, and hope for the best. But yeah, I think without a doubt, it's probably a down year coming for the league, which is not great given the league, I don't think, has been in great shape the last few years regardless.
Yeah.
I think it's possible that, you get a team that can take off and win 23, 24 games, but I just think it's going to be really hard. And I think it's probably more likely that we're in for a, lots of 13 and 7s and 12 and 8s and, tiebreakers. And unfortunately that probably portends a, 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. And that's unfortunate, but I don't think it's necessarily like destiny forever. I think it's a 1 year. Obviously, like it's going to be hard. It's not going to get easier to retain players, I don't think, but I do think that the I think MAAC schools, if they aren't more prepared for retaining players next year, then they've done something wrong, I guess would be the way I would put it.
Yeah. I've joked on the MAAC message board that we should have, all the regular posters should throw in $100 or whatever it is, so that whoever is winning the MAAC's going to Dayton. It feels like to me at this point. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm underestimating, but hey, let's get one of us to Dayton. I want somebody to be there from that board. I hope it's not that bad, but it sounds like you're a little more optimistic than that, but maybe not that much more.
Yeah, I mean, it helps. Like obviously the MAAC got particularly hit hard, but things don't happen in a vacuum, right? Like I think other leagues were dealt big blows. Other leagues were worse than the MAAC coming in, and I think the other thing too is like, you never know what happens conference tournament week, right? Like the MAAC has been certainly known for its kind of March Madness calamity and swapping out its 1 seed for a 2, 3, 4. But I think that can happen everywhere, and if it does, obviously that helps boost the MAAC score. But yeah, obviously the hope MAAC wise would be to get a couple teams in like top 150 mix, but I don't think it's obviously a guarantee. It's hard to look at any one roster and say for sure, yeah, like that's the team that looks really good on paper, just because of the amount of turnover.
Yeah, and I have a twinge of optimism because I also look at the rosters and I don't know if anybody's really going to be that bad either. Yeah, it's hard to say for sure, but I look at there's like everybody's got something to offer, so who knows? We'll see. So I know we're recording this on June 26th. Certainly not looking to hold you or anyone else any projections, especially when there are several MAC schools who are not done recruiting yet, or in the case of, say, somebody like Siena waiting on an important waiver. But if you had to throw me a top 5 teams that are not going to be in the pig, who comes to mind right off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I have
Ranking them, not ranking them. Yeah.
So I think the top 5 I would like are probably Ryder, because they have, the one returning all MAC guy. Weeks from UMass is a big time shooter. I think he'll be a good player in this league. I think Iona with Tobin and the trust you have in him, as well as the talent that they were able to bring in. I think look around the league, like it's a real case. This is the most talented roster in the conference, which I think is a testament to the job that he did. I think Siena and Niagara I feel decent about. I think Siena has probably I think a guy who has a real chance to be MAC Player of the Year, and Michael Ely. And I think Karma obviously hasn't been as portal driven, and obviously some of this is dependent on the Dur Gordon waiver. But if he can be eligible, especially, I think they did a good job with some of their freshmen. I think that's something that I think they've kind of been conscious about, is like, hey, like we can get a more talented player if we take freshmen. And yeah, that means you might take some lumps in November and December because you're playing 18 and 19-year-olds. But I think long term that can have some benefits, even if they do transfer up, right? Like, again, if we'll use the Javian McCollum example, right? Like there's not a lot of Javian McCollum level talents available as juniors and seniors in the MAC, whether that be as transfers or that be as JUCOs. Like it's just hard. So I think they'll be there. And I think Niagara was really aggressive in the portal, which I loved, right? Especially for a school that I don't know for sure, but on paper, you wouldn't expect to be making significant moves in the NIL space, right? Like they added a lot of volume. They had a lot of transfers, guys who have had some proven level of production. Some questions at point guard for me, but I think they're in the mix. And I think Paulus, if you ask coaches around the league, is really well respected for what he runs offensively. 5th is hard, man. I mean, I think I'd probably kind of like the Quinnipiac roster the most. I mean, I think it was kind of a bizarre, like the Bacora whole saga was bizarre, but when you come out of it with like the athleticism that they have, especially up front with like Springs and Otieno and Amari Tice, and they get Elijah Taylor back, hopefully healthy, who was the Notre Dame transfer who a lot of people were excited about before. I think he tore his ACL, and then Belanc back as well in the backcourt helps. So a lot of point guard questions around the league. You say, oh, Quinnipiac, maybe no point guard. Okay, Niagara, I don't know what they're doing at point guard. Siena, all right, what are we doing at point guard? Like that's probably why we think the league is going to be down, is when you don't have good point guards, it's probably going to be tough for the league. But I think those teams probably look the most talented / most complete, and I trust all those coaches relatively solidly, at least.
Okay. That sounds good. And then I can't let you leave without talking a little bit more. You brought up NIL, you brought up the portal, and you brought up Dur Gordon. It was probably the most interesting MAC recruiting battle for Siena and Iona for Dur Gordon. So I'm going to give you a 3-part question, if you will. So some high level thoughts on the impact of NIL on leagues like the MAC. What do you think of this new world with the portal, where we have all of a sudden very exciting off season? I think there's been one benefit from it. That's been that, but just your thoughts on how the portal impacts college basketball. Is it good or bad, really? And then your take on how the whole recruitment of Dur Gordon went down, NIL's role in it, impact of the latest transfer guidance impacting him, and why he's in limbo right now. So a lot of stuff to roll into one answer there for you.
Sure. So on the NIL front, 2 years in, I think the biggest thing that surprised me is how many players NIL was going to be a significant factor in their recruitment, right? Like I think when it started, I thought, okay, like the highest level guys, it was going to be a big deal, and you were going to have to put together real money for it. But like, especially this spring, once there was like a market starting to settle in, like I was very surprised how many schools in the, I wouldn't say like MAC level, but like the next tier, like A10 schools, WCC, even like some Horizon League schools I knew had a lot to throw around, like consistently throwing like $75,000 offers at like low major transfers up, right? Mm-hmm. So like, not the like highest end guys in the portal from the MAC, right? Not the Walter Claytons or the McCollums or guys like that, but like some of the second and third tier guys, those were the numbers I was hearing. And I was surprised by that, because look, I think it's going to be really hard, especially in a world where it's not tax deductible, which is where we're going, for any MAC school, let alone, any of them that don't have strong fan bases to put together $50,000 and $75,000 annual offers to their best players, right? It's one thing to lose the guys who are going to go to the SEC. It's another thing when like, all right, we now can't retain our talent to the Atlantic 10 or to like a good CAA school. That's a problem, right?
Mhm.
How sustainable that is for everyone, I don't know, right? I think if you talk to coaches right now, it's June, right? There's obviously optimism, like, yeah, in 9 months we'll have the money together to do this again next year or do it better next year. Will that happen? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, there could be federal legislation. Like there's all sorts of, there's all sorts of moving parts there. But I think the biggest thing is like at a MAAC level, like you want to be able to take care of your guys, right? Like make them feel comfortable, right? Even if you don't have, 50 and 75 to throw around, like make sure that they're like everything they want is taken care of. They're never, you just want to give them as good a student athlete experience as you can, right? And whether that's sweetening the pot with 25 grand or whether that's, better facilities investments and things like that, like I think you have to be smart about where you're asking for money and things like that. And you have to be really smart allocating your resources, right? Like if you go if you have, 60 grand to spend on your team as a whole, spending it all in one place might not be the smartest thing. Spending it, it's going to be a very big learning curve. And I don't know that it will be solved in one off season. So as for how that impacts the portal, I think, it is very exciting. It's very fun. But I think the other thing is obviously it's hurting teams in the MAAC right now. It's very clearly is. And I think the longer term thing, and this kind of ties to the NIL, it is portal guys are more NIL conscious than high school kids, especially lower level high school recruits. So if you're going to recruit good portal kids, you're going to need money to spend. So you're either going to be able to afford maybe 2-3 transfers, or you're going to have to take worse transfers, right? Like that's kind of the reality. And I think, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, like I think you're going to have to make decisions on, do we want younger talent or older experience? How everyone balances that, answers that question is kind of everyone's choice, right? And I think some coaches will try young 1 year and hate coaching young guys, then try old 1 year and hate they don't have any talent, right? Like that's just the kind of the way of the world. Yeah. As for the Drew Gordon situation, and certainly was an interesting recruitment. I think it will be interesting to see if Siena and Iona can kind of one up the rest of the MAAC from an NIL standpoint. Obviously, that was mentioned in the articles and whatnot after the commitment was that NIL was a factor. I don't think either program really wants to be a bidding war program. I'm not sure that either program is resourced well enough to be a bidding war program, but yeah, if there's a bit of a sweetener that one can throw in to get a guy done who I think probably is one of the more talented players in the league, you have to do it. Now, the only reason he's probably available to a Siena or to an Iona is the fact that he might have to sit this year. And for one, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, right? Like if you spent all your NIL money on a guy who can't play, that might be a difficult look. But I actually think that like finding guys who can sit out or are willing to sit out is kind of a good strategy for a MAAC team right now, right? Like if you can get a higher level of player and you don't need 13 playable guys, right? Like it's great if you can do that, but realistically, pretty hard to fill 13 good players. So if I can stick one at the end of my bench that might have to sit next year, but gets me all league level talent, that's a risk I'm probably willing to take. Will he be eligible? I don't know the specifics enough of the situation to really say. Obviously, it's a big deal in the MAAC. I think I will say this. If him being eligible is a sign that everyone is going to be eligible who transfers twice without graduating, and that there is truly no teeth to NCAA enforcement and whatnot, I think it's like the landscape is just going to get harder, right? Because the one benefit of, hey, we can recruit a transfer who has 2 or 3 years to play is like, all right, we got him now. Like he's stuck. And if he's not stuck and he can move whatever he wants, it doesn't matter, then I think that's to say I agree or disagree with the rule. I just think like at some point, like there has to be some sort of guideline, like this is how it works. And if the rule is like, well, you can't transfer, but you can, we'll give you a waiver as long as you like say you had a mental health issue, whatever, like that's going to be really tricky. My personal opinion on the whole thing is that everyone should be able to transfer once, and everyone, if their coach leaves or is fired or whatever, that should be a grounds for a second transfer. There should be no other grounds. There should be no, like, why they chose the one wishy-washy thing of like mental health or other extenuating circumstances, like the waiver criteria, to me was like bananas. Like who decided like, yeah, we want more paperwork on our desks? Like it just made no sense to me. But that was a very long, kind of winded answer, but hopefully that answered some of your questions / enlightened some people on some of the stuff I see in the day-to-day markets of the things.
Yeah, no, it was a 3-part question, so I expected it to be longer. So my concern with NIL, let's just take a roster. Let's say you give a guard $100,000, and then another guard gets 20,000, and the kid who got the 20 averages 12 points a game. The kid who got 100 averages 9 points a game. What kind of friction is that going to cause in a locker room?
A lot. I mean, it's very it's funny because I don't think we've totally seen that yet. But I think it's coming because more guys are going to get paid and more numbers are going to become obvious. Yeah. I'm almost more concerned. Like, I do think guys are somewhat more mature than given credit for. Like, I think a lot of times, like the contract is what it is. They're going to want more. I think my bigger concern is like, it's never enough, right? Like it's, I wanted, I need 100,000 to stay, right? We'll use that number. It's just a big round number. And then all of a sudden it's June and I'm able to graduate. And now there's all these people saying I can get 400. Well, I want 200 now. Right. And I was talking to a Mountain West staff about this on the road recruiting a couple weeks ago. Like they felt like maybe they could get to the kid's desired number on March 30th. But what happens in 2 months and in 6 months in September when they say they're not happy or they want a house for their parents or, this happens. Like, what happens next year? Are we going to let him walk next year? Are we going to spend $200,000 to have him for one more year and then he's going to transfer anyway? Like, I think that's the hard thing, is that it's not, okay, we negotiated this, it's done, because it's not like a set market. It's not a contract like an NBA contract where you have some level of like, you have to stay through the remainder of the contract. I don't know how you approach it. I think when you have a tight budget, like every MAAC school is going to have, right? Inevitably, this is not going to be like, we have $1 million to spend. If we blow 200 by accident, it doesn't matter. Like that's not going to. If you invest big in a player and it fails, it is going to really have an impact on your team, and it might have an impact on your ability to fundraise in the future. I think it's going to be really, really challenging to answer all these questions, and I think it's where you need good athletic department support. You need a coach who's bought into it. And I think you need people, whether they be boosters or people involved in your collective or however you want to call your, NIL machine. You need people who are intelligent, but not trying to run the operation, right? Like you do not need people attempting to be the GM of Iona or the GM of Siena, right? That's not a good recipe, because especially at this level, like it's going to turn into a pissing contest that nobody wants. So that would be my concern.
All right, and then I'll ask you one more NIL related question. Our friend Rick Bettino had no roster spots. Oh wait, somebody else is available. I think we'll take him. But hey, let's pay that last roster spot with NIL money. Is that going to lead to like schools that would have infinite dollars starting to stockpile players?
I think yes, to a small extent, but I think the narrative about that move has become a little bit overrated, just in the sense of like, at some point, like logic steps in, right? Like the people who are donating this money are still business people, and the players who the teams involved, like players still want to play, right? So there's certain circumstances where you'll say, okay, like we have the opportunity to go get Simeon Wiltshire, we're going to pay him with NIL, or we get a great international kid, we're going to pay him with NIL. Sure, that's possible, but I think the overriding thing, and we just saw a kid from Alabama hit the portal, Javon Quinterly, who's widely rumored to be getting a bigger offer somewhere else, and the bigger offer is like he's going to be the starting point guard. He's obviously going to get a ton of money. It's probably more money, but the reason it's more money than Alabama is because he doesn't matter that much to Alabama. He matters to Alabama, but Alabama has Aaron Estrada, who MAAC fans know, and they have one other transfer, and they have another guy coming back in the backcourt. So like, if Javon Quinterly walks into the office and says, I want X amount of money, and you say like, yeah, whatever, man, like move on. Right. And I think that's what's really going to happen, right? Like at some point, the 14th man is not that valuable. So you're not going to spend that much money. Maybe there's a few schools where the money is so stupid that you will do it anyway. But I don't anticipate that being like a massive trend where every high major team now has 17 scholarship level guys and it just further depletes the talent level. I don't think that's where we're going.
Okay. All right. Well, it's something, of course, that's sensitive to us because two of the last guys on that St. John's bench are Iona transfers. And, it's, we once a Gael, always a Gael kind of thing. So anyway, well, Kev, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on the podcast. One thing's for certain, the portals made things this and NIL have made this off season far more interesting than a typical off season. So I know you're quite busy and I appreciate you taking the time. It's been great having you on, and for both of our sakes, let's hope the MAAC is not as awful as we think it might be this year.
Yes, I hope so too. Appreciate you having me, and hopefully the Gaels have a slightly quieter off season in 2024.
Oh, I would hope so. Jeez, it's hard not to.
Let Tobin go fishing, man. Let's do it.
That's right. Well, thank you again for coming on, and we'll catch up down the line.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks again, Kevin Sweeney, for joining the podcast, and I hope Gael Nation can finally appreciate something good actually came out of Siena. Anyway, it was a packed episode, and we're ramping up down the stretch, as I've been telling you guys. We got more scout reports to come, and then it's preview season around here on the pod. Stick around for the ride. Go Gaels.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the IonaHoops.com podcast. This podcast is a production of IonaHoops.com with publisher Guy Filatico. The opinions shared during this podcast are those of Guy Filatico, IonaHoops.com, and any featured guests. This podcast is not affiliated with Iona University Athletics or the university itself. Thank you for supporting IonaHoops.com.